Next one I like because it's mad, and it was released by Umbrella in conjunction with Monster Fest. Mad Heidi. It's basically Joanna Spyri's Heidi, but with a full tilt boogie twist, where Switzerland is taken over by a dictator played by Casper Van Dien, and it does all of the cliches of Switzerland. And Heidi, whose father gets killed by the dictator, goes on a mad rampage, and her boyfriend gets killed. She goes totally Rambo on it. This one's a lot of fun. Mad Heidi is just such mad fun. In fact, I'll show you the poster again. I've done a video about this already, but I just love it. There's one of the posters. And there's the other one with Casper Van Dien playing the dictator of Switzerland. It's crazy mad, and it's great. It uses special effects a lot. This is the kind of action comedy that I really like. It. Blood, guts, Mad Heidi with the slipcover, and on the back it says, "This ain't no Shirley Temple film," because there was a Heidi movie starring Shirley Temple when she was a kid. I love this kind of film. I love these mad, balls to the wall action films with their tongue firmly in their cheek. And Mad Heidi is definitely one of them. Again, you've got to set your expectations to a comedy horror film. But once you do, I think you'll enjoy that one.
너 점점 엄마 닮아간다. 꿈꿨어? 방에 다 나갔어. 누가 그랬어? 그 여자가 그런 거지. 왜 이래 버릇없이?
Now, I've got two Korean movies that also came up from Umbrella and were mind-blowing for me. This one's directed by Kim Ji-won, and it is A Tale of Two Sisters. And there's a slipcover for it there, which is beautiful. That artwork is wonderful. It's about a sister who returns from a mental institution. She's had suffered from shock and psychosis. And she's got a younger sister that lives with her and her father. And things start going off the rails pretty quickly. Her father is very distant from her. And as the story evolves, we find out what's actually happening. And what's happening is not what the young daughter who's come back from the mental institution perceives to be happening. And ultimately, it's a tragic story, but it's really beautifully made. What year did this come out in? 2003, so it's 20 years old. But I hadn't heard about this one. Blew me away. It's an incredibly well-told story with great acting, beautiful direction, beautiful cinematography, telling a tragic and sad story that I'm not going to spoil for you. I'm a bastard, but I'm not that much of a bastard. A Tale of Two Sisters, if you haven't seen it, highly, highly recommended from me. The other one I got was this one, which is a limited release by Umbrella. I Saw the Devil, which is so full on. It's about an intelligence officer whose girlfriend is killed by a serial killer, and he decides to track down the serial killer and not capture him but torture him. And indeed he does that. The serial killer is played by Choi Min-sik, who was in Old Boy, and the young policeman played by Lee Byung-hun goes on such a dark and monstrous journey. This is not for the faint-hearted. If you're into solid action films and into Korean crime/horror films, this is the one. And there's a quote from Nietzsche on the back: "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. When you gaze into an abyss, the abyss gazes into you." That standard quote from Nietzsche. And never in a movie has it been more true in this one. There's the back. This is an incredible horror film. It takes you on a path of darkness for this character as his life changes, as his girlfriend and fiance is caught and killed by this human monster. Really highly recommend this one. Next one I've talked about in the video as well. FP1 Doesn't Answer. German film from before the Nazis were there. About a landing field for aircraft in the middle of the Atlantic so there can be transatlantic flights. And this is undermined by various business people who find financial advantage in sabotaging the platform FP1, and they do so. There are two versions of this on this. There's the German version, which is 112 minutes, and a 78-minute English language version with Conrad Beat, which I haven't watched yet. But this is kind of between the world wars, futuristic science fiction for its time. Beautiful sets, beautiful locations, well acted. The actors are incredibly engaging, a little over the top. It's from 1932, so it's before the Reichstag burnt down. And I saw an online version of this. I decided to spring for the Kino Lorber version with the English language version as well. Diving back into the history of cinema, this is the kind of movie I like. Light science fiction, but again, it's seen from the viewpoint of 1932. So people couldn't predict the fact that plane engines would get so much more powerful and that a platform in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean wasn't going to be necessary. I enjoyed that a lot, and I definitely am going to watch the English language version as soon as I possibly can. Next one's a bit of an obvious choice, and it became a cultural phenomenon. Barbie. Greta Gerwig's Barbie with Margot Robbie and Baby Goose. I've talked about this on the channel before, but I'm delighted in it. I love what it does. It's one of those comedies that's got a great punchline in the last line of dialogue in the movie. A lot of guys hated it, but that shows more about those guys than it does about the movie. It is a lot of fun. I'm not the target audience for this film, I'll be honest with you. I'm not the peak target audience for this film, but I enjoyed it a lot. I love the look of it, I love what it says, and I love how it says it. And I've been a fan of Greta Gerwig since I saw Ladybug, and I want to see what she does in the future. Now that she's made a movie that's made over $1 billion, first female director to do that, I want to see what Greta Gerwig does next, and I'll be there for it. And if you haven't seen it, you should. If you're one of those guys that's been dithering about seeing it, just back a shot glass of whiskey and watch the bloody thing. I think you'll find you'll enjoy it, and it is great fun, entertaining, beautiful to look at, and it has a viewpoint, which is something that so many big budget movies these days simply don't. Next one's Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, which with Barbie became Barbenheimer, the biggest cultural phenomenon in cinema since who knows when. And Oppenheimer works. I think that the conceit of Christopher Nolan not only using practical special effects, which he didn't, there were tweaks all the way through the film, is interesting. And the fact that it's not just about the big boom in Oppenheimer's life, but it's about the whole career and life of the man, is something that a lot of people didn't deal well with when it came out. But Cillian Murphy is great as Oppenheimer. Florence Pugh is fantastic in this as well. Even Matt Damon gives a great piece of work as the general in charge of the nuclear project to build a bomb. And for me, this movie worked. I've stood at ground zero in Hiroshima, and so I've got a visceral feel of what was at stake when these guys were building the nuclear weapon. I've seen that building in the Peace Park in Hiroshima, and what a nuclear weapon can do to a building, let alone people, is something I have direct knowledge of. And I was thinking about that while I was watching Oppenheimer in the cinema. I saw it the day after I saw Barbie. It's a recommend from me. I think Christopher Nolan's a fascinating filmmaker. I didn't like Dunkirk because of the sound design more than anything, but apart from that, I've always liked his films. And Oppenheimer, which I'm getting on 4K, is definitely a solid piece of third decade of the 21st century filmmaking. Next one's a documentary by Sebastian Lifshitz, which is really interesting. It turned up on the BBC, and it's about a private resort in the Catskills in the 1950s in America, which was a haven for transgender people and men who dressed in drag, who were transvestites. And at a time when people's lives and careers could be totally destroyed by their sexual needs, this place was a haven for people who didn't fit into the heteronormative lifestyle that was mandated by those times. And in modern times, people return to where Casa Susanna, it's called, where Casa Susanna was, and talk about their experiences there. There are a few surviving people from that time. Yeah, there were dance parties, there were cabarets, there were all sorts of things. And some of it was just offering each other tips and support, and in a sense, saving lives by showing people that they weren't alone. I liked it a lot. It was released in 2022. And I believe it is on streaming services now. And this is a kind of documentary which shows us that the things that confront us at times are not new. They were just repressed for very, very, very bad reasons. So the next one I got for you, I saw in the cinema, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is there. It's, in Australia, it's called Dracula, Voyage of the Demeter, which is about one of the chapters of the original novel of Dracula. It's about the ship that took Dracula from Transylvania to London and what occurred when the ship was washed up on the shores at Whitby. And yeah, it's very Nosferatu-ish, fairly low budget. It's got a pretty good cast in there as well. Corey Hawkins is in there, Aisling Franceschi, David Desmachien is in it as well, and Liam Cunningham as the captain of the ship. All set pretty much on the boat once they get going. And it works really well as a small horror film. And the Dracula we get on this ship is truly confrontational. Very much, as I said, a Nosferatu kind of character, but Nosferatu take it to 11. If you haven't seen this one and you're kind of dithering about it, you should check it out. Not an enormous budget, 45 million, which isn't a lot, and it didn't make money. But I'm glad I've got this on Blu-ray. I think it's a solid piece of horror, and the acting on it is really good. I recommend highly the acting as well. So you should check that one out. Next up, we've got a Netflix film. There haven't been many Netflix films that really grabbed me this year, but there's a couple. And one of which is They Clone Tyrone, which was made by Jules Taylor. It stars Jamie Foxx, John Boyega, and Teyonah Parris. And it's the story of a sex worker, a pimp, and a drug dealer in a ghetto in Eastern America who find out that they're being controlled by a bunch of people underneath their suburb. And as the title suggests, they're actually clones of other people. This is a really interesting social commentary film. John Boyega is great as Fontaine, who is one of the characters. Teyonah Parris as Yo-Yo is great. Jamie Foxx as Slick Charles. One of the bad guys is played by Keith Sutherland. And there's David Alan Grier in there playing a preacher. It's a hidden gem of science fiction which talks about the disenfranchisement of people of colour in America, particularly under the capitalist system. Goes places where a lot of American movies refuse to go because they hold on to the illusion that everything's more or less hunky-dory and that capitalism works and that there's no disadvantage to people of colour in America. I think, again, this is another one that will look better in future years than it does now. Hasn't had a physical release that I know of, because Netflix definitely holds its cards to its chest when it comes to physical media. But if you haven't seen it, They Clone Tyrone is a good, solid piece of science fiction. And the acting is on point. And Teyonah Parris, who's also in The Marvels, which is another movie I recommend, is really good as Yo-Yo. She's very much kind of a Pam Grier 1970s action film character. Like the other two, once she finds out what the world is really about, her street smarts and her cunning become weapons against the people who are controlling, manipulating, and repressing her and her community. A combination of that 1970s blaxploitation stuff with 21st century social commentary and science fiction. Nothing there not to love, so you should check out They Clone Tyrone. Next one's a movie starring John David Washington. Science fiction film, which I saw with my nephew Billy, because we always see a movie when he comes to Melbourne. We saw The Creator, directed by Gareth Edwards, which is set in a future where there is a war between human beings, particularly America, and AI and robots. And a special ops guy, played by John David Washington, is sent to Asia, and is very vague about which part of Asia, to find the person who created the AI and to end this war between human beings and AI, which, as we find out as the movie progresses, was actually started by deliberate misunderstanding by the Americans. Los Angeles is hit by a nuke, and that starts the war. The AI didn't really start the war, it was started by a computer glitch. But it's got such a good cast in it. Alison Janney playing a kick-ass military person, Colonel Howell. Ken Watanabe's in there as well, Gemma Chan. Very multicultural cast. It's shot in Vietnam and Thailand, I believe. And so it has a very interesting look. Cinematography is fantastic. The use of computer-generated effects to inform the story and create the world is done really well in The Creator. I'm still not convinced that John David Washington is a great actor. I've seen him in Tenet, I've seen him in this, I've seen him in a couple other things. Black Klansman is probably his best work. But I think that he may be on the arc of becoming a better actor, along the lines of his father Denzel. But at this stage, I'm still on the border of Is he a good actor? Is he not? Is he going to do a lot of informed and grounded stuff, or is he going to cash checks and just do action things? Incredible design of the floating warship the Americans create. It's set in 2070, so it's fairly futuristic, and it's got sympathetic AI, it's got sympathetic robots, it's got sympathetic humans, and even the bad guys, which happen to be the Americans in this case, are grounded and have reasons to be who and what they are. Didn't get a lot of love. What was the budget? $80 million budget, made $104 million, so it didn't do tremendously well. But it's worth checking out if you haven't already. And I think when it does come out on physical media, because it hasn't yet here in Australia, I will pick up a Blu-ray of it. It's the kind of science fiction that I enjoy, and it's also the kind of science fiction that I want to encourage by putting my money on the line for it. Next one I talked about on the channel briefly as well. It's a 2011 Japanese pinku film, which means it's got a bit of nudity in it, called Underwater Love. It's about a woman who lives in a seaside town in Japan. She's almost 40, and her boyfriend, who drowned as a teenager, has come back to life as a kappa, which is a kind of river spirit, a frog-like river creature. And she's engaged to the guy who runs the fishing co-op in the town, and yet her ex-boyfriend comes back to life. She meets him, and they kind of sort of fall in love again. It's a low-budget film, but it goes in mad directions. Part of it's a musical with singing and dancing in it. Part of it's a pinku film and all of that kind of stuff, and part of it's a kind of rom-com as well. It's neither fish nor fowl, which is a deliberate joke there, by the way, but it's sweet and cute and a lot of fun. The actors are all engaging. Sawa Masaki playing Asuka, the woman, is really good. Yoshiro Uezawa playing the kappa is kind of cool. His name's Tatsuya. And the other cast, and it doesn't have a particularly large cast, are all really interesting characters. I've got this thing for soft adult films that are also sweet and cute. Things like the 1974 Alice in Wonderland with Kristen Bell. That combination of adult material and sweetness and cuteness really works for me. And this one, directed by Shinji Amikawa, is quite sweet and cute. Low budget, but a lot of fun. The kappa costumes are fantastic, but I will go along with it, and I enjoyed it. Next one's a documentary that I talked about the loss of Melbourne here in Australia, our classic cinemas and a lot of the classic architecture. The Lost City of Melbourne. The Australian documentary is now on SBS On Demand here in Australia. It's one of the government streaming services. And it uses a lot of archival footage and interviews just to show how much architecture and how much of the city's history has been lost. Because in the 50s, 60s and 70s, they ripped down a lot of this stuff to put up ugly, brutalist architecture. Really, it's a love letter to the city. It's a love letter to the bits that have survived. And it shows a lot of really cool buildings and a lot of really cool archival footage and also archival stills of Melbourne as it was at the time. But it's a labour of love, this one. And it is available from Madman Entertainment as well as being on a streaming service. I wasn't born here in Melbourne. I lived the first half of my life in Sydney. And so a lot of Melbourne's history is unknown to me. And this movie gives us a lot of that. My good friend Morris from Love That Album podcast is a big fan of this film as well. Highly recommended if you can find a copy of it. You may well learn more about Australia and particularly Melbourne's history if you see it. So that's what I've got for you. A lot of films there. Some of them old, some of them new, some of them borrowed, some of them blue. In fact, one of them was blue. But the films that I saw for the first time this year and I enjoyed. And when I see films for the first time that delight me, it refreshes my love of cinema. Just having that renewal and not just relying on the nostalgia train to only watch things that I loved when I was 12 years old or 20 years old or 5 years old, but watching films from the past and from the present that I haven't seen before and that I can come to fresh without any preconceptions, without any memory, but with a lot of love for what these films are and what these films do. And for me, that's incredibly valuable. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, or you can support the channel by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Science Fiction Saturday is coming up. I've got a haul from Imprint that I'm going to be reviewing on Monday. the Sunday video for some of you, and things roll on. We're getting into December, we're getting into Die Hard season. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to find something special for the channel members and the Patreon supporters for the end of the year. And until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch movies you haven't seen before. It's not all about nostalgia. And I'll catch you next time.